Movies. I was never an avid moviegoer, not even when I was a teenager, when it was the thing to do on a Saturday night. Nowadays, in an average year, I'll see maybe 2 or 3 films in the theater. When I do venture out, there are 3 conditions upon which I insist. First, I will not see a movie on the night it opens. I don't like crowds, and I especially don't like crowds comprised of the kind of people who feel the need to see a movie before anyone else does. Such crowds tend to be younger and rowdier than should be gathered under a single roof, or at least gathered under a single roof without a nun with a ruler to keep order. They tend to yell advice at the characters on the screen, then to shush one another for yelling advice at the characters on the screen, and then to challenge one another to fistfights for shushing one another. Second, I will not sit anywhere except on the aisle. In a controlled environment, say on the sofa in my living room, I can easily sit through a 2-hour movie without having to get up and use the bathroom. However, the bladder has a mind of its own. If it senses that a bathroom break cannot be had, or can be had only by climbing over the scrunched-in knees of a half-dozen cranky strangers, it will fill up again and again in defiance of mammalian probabilities, as if to reprimand its owner for putting it in such a precarious situation. Third, I will not see a Leonardo DiCaprio movie. Leo and I have a bad history, going back to 1996, when he starred in William Shakespeare's Romeo and Juliet. I was running on a treadmill in the gym, listening to FM radio through a headset plugged into the treadmill's entertainment unit, when I heard an ad for the film. It sounded like the kind of thing I'd want to see, like the kind of thing I might even want to show to my freshman English class, in lieu of Franco Zeffirelli's stuffy '68 version of the play. The new version, apart from Leo, also starred Claire Danes, whose name I recognized from MTV's My So-Called Life. I could well imagine her as an angst-plagued Juliet. On the whole, I was feeling pretty enthusiastic about R&J right up until the ad ended, and I was urged to buy the soundtrack, which featured music from a band called the Butthole Surfers. I remember thinking, what the hell? And then stumbling ever so slightly on the treadmill. The headphones jerked out of my ears, and I made a grab for them, which caused me to trip over my feet, fall onto my side, and shoot off the back of the treadmill, knocking over 2 young women in spandex outfits who'd been chatting behind me. As one witness said, it looked like I was picking up a 610 spare. Which leads me to the occasion I violated all 3 of my movie-going rules and vowed never to do so again. The year was 1997. I was dating Carmen, who at certain angles and at a certain light resembled the actress Andie MacDowell, slightly relevant, and who was a die-hard romantic, very relevant. Carmen got it into her head weeks in advance that she was going to see the movie Titanic the night it opened. Not that she wanted to see it. She was going to see it with or without me. Now, I wasn't exactly wise in the ways of Amore, but even I knew that you didn't let your new girlfriend, who kind of looked like Andie MacDowell, go alone to the decade's most romantic movie. Thus, on Friday morning, December 19th, 1997, Carmen stood in line outside her local theater and bought 2 tickets as soon as the box office opened. The fact that there had been a line just to buy tickets in the morning was an ominous sign. So the 2 of us arrived at the theater that evening 2 hours in advance of the 8 o'clock show and stood at the head of a line that eventually turned the corner and took up most of 2 New York City blocks. As the doors opened, Carmen rushed inside to claim our seats and dispatched me for a farm silo of popcorn, along with 2 barrels of Diet Coke. For half a minute after I entered the theater itself, I could not find her. Then at last I caught sight of a distant hand wave. She was dead center, front to back, and dead center, side to side. It was the side-to-side position that caused me to cringe. There were a dozen seats on either side of the 2 she'd staked out, and they were filling fast. I negotiated the obstacle course between us without spilling a kernel of popcorn or a drop of soda, though I likely wouldn't have made it had not half the rows stood up to let me pass. No one said a word because the movie hadn't begun yet, but there were several glares. I handed Carmen the food and drink, and then looked left and right. I knew at once there was no chance, none whatsoever, that I would be getting up from that seat until the movie was over. That was the first inkling that I needed to pee. I settled in for 15 minutes of previews and hunkered down for the feature presentation. Toward the end of the opening credits, the fact that I had to use the facilities had begun to recede in my consciousness. There was no urgency, not yet, and I was soon caught up in the story, rooting hard for Jack, Leo, to make it onto the ship, sighing at the initial appearance of Rose, Kate Winslet, hissing at the entrance of Rose's boorish fiancé, Cal, Billy Zane. The first full-screen shot of the Titanic itself wowed me in a that's entertainment kind of way. It was an hour into the movie, right around the time Jack begins to sketch Rose in the nude, that the need to pee pressed itself to the forefront of my mind. Again, I glanced to the left and to the right. No way out. All right, I thought. Here I am. I shouldn't have gotten myself into this predicament, but I did. And there's nothing to do now except tough it out. Human beings have endured worse punishments than an hour or so of internal discomfort. Think of Robert De Niro and Christopher Walken in The Deer Hunter. Think of Sylvester Stallone in Rocky IV, or the audiences who had to sit through Rocky IV. Think of Shemp stumbling into a tool shed. Compared with them, I had it pretty damn easy. Plus, I had an epic saga unfolding in front of me. That gigantic special-effected ocean liner was about to hit a digital iceberg and sink. I wasn't going to let a couple of 100 milliliters of distraction ruin the spectacle. That's what I told myself. Titanic runs 3 hours and 14 minutes. The entire second half of the movie consists of running water. Water crashing through the ship's hull and into the engine room. Water filling the lower levels of the ship corridor by corridor. Water rushing up the stairs and into staterooms. There's Jack, handcuffed to a steam pipe as the water rises from his ankles to his waist to his chest. There's Rose wading into the water to find Jack, her gown clinging to her heaving breasts, then making a swim for it until at last the drenched lovers are reunited. And then, of course, there's the ocean itself, the whirl and roil and crest of its waves. Each scene, each shot, each frame seemed to resonate within my bladder. There are certain degrees of biological exigency that no leg crossing can tame. The desire for relief and the will to uphold personal dignity go to war, the former in breakout mode, the latter in containment. It's a kind of homeostatic battle of the bulge, and I fought it, hammer and tongs, for 2 solid hours. By the end, my left leg was at my right hip in half lotus position, and my right foot was tapping the floor at a speed that approached a Buddy Rich drum solo. My heart was throbbing in my chest, and sweat was beating on my forehead. If there had been a single laugh in the last half hour of the movie, I'd have been a goner. But there wasn't. And when at last the aged Rose tossed that blue heart-shaped pendant over the side of the salvage ship, and when at last she and Jack were reunited in death, both youthful, both beautiful, gazing into one another's eyes on the polished marble stairwell of the revived Titanic, and when at last the credits began to roll and the lights went on and the theater filled with the voice of Celine Dion, I jumped up, only to be pulled back down by Carmen, who, like the rest of the audience, remained in their seats applauding the name of producer, director, writer James Cameron, and then, one by one, the names of each of the principal actors. Only as the identities of the key grip and makeup artists were revealed did the crowd begin to exit the theater. By then, I had slipped into a state of calm, almost euphoria, akin, I suspect, to what climbers feel on Everest when their bivouac has failed and when the chill of the mountain snow becomes one with their bones. Then, at once, there was a path to the aisle, and then another path to the exit. I left Carmen blubbering in her seat and scrambled out. Sighting the men's room, I sprinted and shoved my way past men twice my size, their eyes moist with emotion and thus, mercifully, oblivious to my cutting in front of them. Moments later, I was standing in front of the urinal. Relief was at hand. Then, for several seconds, nothing. The more colloquial term for such a pause is stage fright, but this had more the feel of a lone Japanese soldier decades after World War II has ended, holed up in his bunker on a remote South Pacific island, still wary of letting go, still believing, because he cannot quite believe otherwise, that the war rages on, that the fate of the empire rests with him. But then, at long last, relief. Carmen awaited me in the theater lobby at the edge of the corridor that led to the restrooms. Her eyes were puffy and red, and she had a wad of balled-up tissues in her left hand and a tragic look on her face. It was a look I'd seen before. I walked her home, and she kissed me on the cheek when we came to her door. Several days later, in a letter, she told me that she no longer wanted to continue our romance, that she had come to realize, watching the movie, that I didn't complete her, that I wasn't her soulmate, her one true love, the one she wanted by her side when the credits began to roll. That metaphor has stuck with me through the years, for it caused me to realize that despite the many ways in which we divide ourselves by ethnicity, by creed, by gender and age and geography, when the final credits begin to roll, there really are only two tribes of human beings, center people and aisle people. Compared with these, other divisions are trivial. Carmen was center stock. I was aisle to the core. Therefore, my heart would go on without her. So too would my bladder.